And we're live. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Purple Blue Pod. I'm in the house tonight with my boy David Mottershead. How do I say that? Did I say it the right way, David?
Mottershead, yeah, close enough, man.
No. But that's what's up, man. So yeah, guys, tonight we're gonna be talking about a few different topics. Me and him usually disagree on Twitter on certain small things, so we're gonna be going over those. But he's a huge guy in the men's rights movement, probably one of the biggest guys on Twitter and just helping men's rights, especially over across the sea over in England. So I'm really excited for him to break down kind of like what is even the big difference, when it comes to men's rights here versus there. Also, we'll be deep diving into a bunch of stuff. But dude, when we start out tonight, just let me know, where did this all start for you, man? Like, what's your personal life like? Did you grow up in a household that you saw a lot of women's issues even growing up, and then what happened, in your own relationships? Like, where did it all start? Like, what made you even start this type of stuff?
Well, trauma based, like a lot of men's rights advocates, to be honest, you have to experience something to realise that there is a need out there. I grew up in the armed forces. I was born into the Royal Air Force. My old man left as adjutant of 31 Squadron. He managed an entire fighter pilot squadron. Spent 13 and a half years out in Germany, and I lived a very insulated life. I have complex PTSD. The docs reckon I've had it since I was 7 years old, since an IRA incident. Essentially, a car pulled up 100 meters away and they threw a briefcase full of explosives out the window. Fortunately, they were as shit at that as they were at restarting the car. They stalled it and panicked, so they had to run off through the married quarters. Luckily, the explosives didn't go off. But most kids on camp that had witnessed it, and most people on camp, started exhibiting, as most people would, PTSD type symptoms. But they usually lessen within 3 to 6 months. But I had an incredibly violent father, so I was never able to come down from that hypervigilance. I was then made homeless 28 days after my 16th birthday, after my dad strangled me unconscious in a alcohol-filled rage. So I went from a very insulated, privileged life to living in a homeless hostel with 300 people, most of them out of prison, gangsters, paedophiles, rapists, all sorts. So I learned very quickly about street cred and how that keeps you alive. And then joined the armed forces to get out of that life. Went abroad. Initially, I was in the Royal Logistics. Served
How old
twice
were
out in
you when you
Kosovo.
first joined?
18.
18. Okay.
A skinny little ginger lad, freckles all over my face, no idea what was going on in the world. Which is why I ended up accidentally walking into 3 minefields while I was out there. But yeah, it was an awesome tour. And I learned the lessons on that tour, that first tour, that I've carried with me ever since. Those would be number one, every single one of us is equal. Number two, material possessions mean absolutely nothing. And number three, and most importantly, nothing is more important than family. Came home, bounced around a bit, run some of the largest nightclubs in the UK, then tried the finance industry, did quite well there, top sales for £150 million worth of deep mining equipment down in Cardiff. And then back into the forces again. Second time round was Household Cavalry, which was Her Majesty's personal bodyguard. Left with PTSD, got married, and I was married to her for 5 years, and the entire relationship was violent. I didn't realise I was a domestic violence victim. It took them a long time to convince me of that. Every time they said it, look, David, she's the violent one, man. I was like, no, that's not how it works, man. Men can't be fucking victims. Do you know what I mean?
And who do you think like sealed that in your head that made you think that?
Well, I think we all thought that up until a few years ago. I mean, I don't think anyone suspected, especially up until
That made you think?
sort of. Sorry, say again.
Oh, my bad. I think something messed up on my computer.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. So I think, I mean, the words male victim didn't appear in law until 2013. Uh, I still remember an interview that was a BBC interview back in 2011, where the feminists were being questioned by BBC News about what they thought about male victims of domestic violence. And they were still saying at that point, they don't exist. If anyone's claiming to be a victim of domestic violence and they're a male, they are clearly a perpetrator. And we're still dealing with that to this day at the very top echelons of the domestic violence sort of industry here in the UK. Occasionally, the feminists might say, yeah, okay, so there are some, but the majority is women. But the only reason they do that is because David Cameron, the former British Prime Minister, wrote to these domestic violence charities in 2015 and said, listen, unless you start treating male victims, we are pulling your funding. So they've been forced to say, all right, they exist. So, yeah, that's long story short, how I got into it.
Where would you say is like the turning point in you starting to like help, because I know you do a lot of stuff, helping in the court system and stuff. Like was that something that you recently got into, or like what made you start getting into that?
Okay, well, in my own situation, there was something conducted called a MARAC, which is a multi-agency risk assessment conference. You still there, man? Shall I hold on for a second?
Sorry, had to let my dog inside.
No problem, man. So yeah, in 2014, a MARAC was conducted, a multi-agency risk assessment conference, and this is something that's put together when domestic violence victim is identified. But you don't actually attend yourself. You just get a letter in the post that says, "Hi, Mr. Mottershead, we have conducted a MARAC and we have found you to be at medium to high risk of being further abused." So at that point, I thought, I mean, that was when I first started fighting it. Like, there's no way I can be a domestic violence victim. I mean, I'd had all of these professionals, we'd had these meetings in social services and things up until that point. And every time I'd gone into these meetings with black eyes and cuts all over me, they'd say things like, well, you must have done something to make her angry. And because at that point, my perception was, well, only men can be perpetrators, so it must be my fault. So every single time I'd be like, right, well, what can I do different? How can I not make her angry next time? How can I do this different? If there's an issue that comes up and we have to talk about it, how do I do it better? Because it's clearly my fault she's hitting me. Anyway.
And it was always physical violence?
No, the psychological violence was the worst, actually. And I think most male victims will tell you that.
Yeah, see, that's what's something I'm really interested in. Can you explain to me some ways that women do like psychological abuse? Because I would say that is something that tons of men are going through today, and they just don't know it or they don't talk about it. And I really think guys should know what it looks like. If you can tell us what it looks like, kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a big area, actually. So it's probably helpful to start at why it happens and why women might be using these types of violence more in a more prevalent manner than male perpetrators. So when you look at the research about how hierarchical structures are set up between adolescents, the best research came out of South Africa from summer camps back in the 80s. Huge studies still used today. And what they found was that the kids were turning up in their teenage groups as teenagers, and they were developing these groups between the boys or between the girls in very different manners. So the boys were doing it through competition and, who's the best at this. It wasn't, a lot of people think it's domination. It's absolutely not domination. It is absolutely skill-based. Who's the best footballer? Who's the best this? Whereas the girls were coming together and initially things would be very good. Everything would gel very quickly. But you've heard this colloquial phrase in society right across the Western world: women can be right bitches to each other. Now that's because after 2 weeks, the girls start using gossip and innuendo as a form of reputation savage with the intent of isolating the target from the wider social community. That is how they set up their hierarchical structures. It's all done off gossip and innuendo. And it's actually a beautiful thing, because it turns out that every single human society in history has been morally policed by women. So that gossip and innuendo keeps us all in line, and we collapse as a society without it. The problem is when we don't recognise that that's going on in the first place, and that's unfortunately
And regulate
what's
it
happening.
and regulate it a little
Absolutely.
bit.
Absolutely. So cancel culture is the prime example. It is out of control feminine energy. And that's why when you look at BLM protesters and things, 70% of them are white, middle to upper class, highly educated women. It's a very female thing. The reason it's gotten out of hand is because of specifically what happened with the domestic violence movement in the 1970s. My friend is Erin Pizzey. She set up Refuge, which is the first ever domestic violence shelter in the world. And she wouldn't stop reporting that 62 of the first 100 women that came through the shelter turned out to be as violent as the men they were claiming to have left. Now, what happened? She had the money, but she didn't have the media support. So she invited these Marxist feminists into the board at the time because they had the media support and no money. But because she wouldn't stop saying these feminists were, or women were as violent as the men, they threatened to kill her. They threatened to kill her kids. They tried to poison her dog. They sent bombs to her house. And it eventually got so bad that she just walked away from the domestic violence charity and the movement. She moved out to Australia and New York and spent the next 15 years between the two areas. But as soon as her kids grew up and got out of the house, she came straight back to the UK and she's been campaigning ever since. She's outstanding. But what happened at that point was that the Marxist feminists that took over had to create an oppressor and an oppressed class. They had to create that bourgeois proletariat dynamic to be able to bring about the Cultural Revolution. So what they did was they covered over passive aggression. And I've got a great article I'll show you at some point, or I'll link it in so you can put it in the comment section later, from an MP called Jackson in 1973. And it's in the local paper, and it says, there are certainly as many male victims of domestic violence out there as there are female, especially as we considered what he called emotionally battered husbands. But being as there are more women dying at the moment, it is right that we concentrate on women for the moment. And the Marxist feminists took that opportunity and they pushed it to the extreme, and they managed to write male victims completely out of the history books by covering over the passive aggression that was a natural response from all women in society. So collectively, right across the world, we have lost our sight of passive aggression. And that's how it's playing out in cancel culture. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. No, so so I sometimes have heard you talk about just like the Hegelian dialectic, or just like different issues, or like how sometimes some of it came from like the Marxist agenda or the Hegelian stuff. Can you kind of like talk about that a little bit more? Because I get really interested whenever you bring that type of stuff up.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the core of all domestic violence policy and legislation, at the very core, the very basis, pull this out and the whole thing collapses, is the phrase, we need to deconstruct the Western prescribed nuclear family unit as it is the source of all oppression for women and girls. Interrupting the patriarchy at the source of his power will usher in the Cultural Revolution, which will lead to the matriarchal future free from all forms of systemic oppression. Now, the key part about that is not one society in human history has ever survived the deconstruction of family. And you can see this all the way back to 2nd century BC, to a Greek statesman by the name of Polybius. He was the first one to record it. He said the downfall of the Greek Empire, the number one cause was the state's interference in the family. I'm now going to ruin the film 300 for everyone. I'm so sorry, everyone. Same thing happened in the Spartan community. So the Spartan Empire wanted better warriors, and they figured, like, if we can get the guys to sort of mold together better, then they'll be better fighters. So they mandated that the warriors had to sleep in each other's beds. The problem with that is wandering hands. God knows how that happened. Side note, to anyone who says you can't teach people to be gay, it's bollocks. We know you can. Anyway, the lads got a bit too familiar. and it got really out of control to the point that the Spartan women, the birth rate just bottomed out, like we're seeing today right across the Western world. And Spartan women eventually started shaving their heads to try and look more like men. That didn't work, so they had to mandate that on the 25th birthday of these warriors, they had to be dragged from the pit of their comrade and forced to marry a woman and have sex with this woman, and only once they'd had sex could they go back to their warriors' pit. And unfortunately, that didn't work either, and that is why the Spartan Empire collapsed. You can see it in the Roman Empire as well. They actually call it the curve of empires. So you see this heightened promiscuity, you see lots more homosexual behavior, that type of thing. Everyone's just, excuse my French, fucking each other, man. And that's how societies collapse. But what's going on with this Marxist side of things, when you hear that phrase that I made reference to earlier, Karl Marx and these other socialists have always known that if you can convince a society to start behaving in a manner that mirrors the curve of empires, eventually they will take it on. And the idea of Marx was that it comes down to conflict theory. So Karl Marx said nobody's allowed to plan for post-revolution. Socialism must be allowed to arise naturally from the ashes. And that reference to the ashes there is their idea that you have to destroy society to absolute ashes, and then you'll get communism. But in the academic world, they're all arguing. I mean, we've had 262 million deaths in the last 150 years as a result of this ideology. And the highest sort of levels of the academic world, they're all like, I don't understand why it hasn't worked. Why aren't we communists yet? And what appears to be going on now is that the academic world and the judiciary specifically, because they were the last line in the defense, they seem to be thinking, right, fuck it, we'll give it another go. This time, fingers crossed. Do you know what I mean?
It's got to work this time. Yeah.
Yeah, this is it.
Shout out to my boy Don Juan with the $2, man. I appreciate the $2, bro. Sergio, welcome back. Yeah, it's been a couple of weeks, guys. So thank you. I got another show on Friday with a guy named Man of Steel. He's a big pickup artist, so make sure y'all come on Friday too. I'm happy I got another show. Dave's foreshadowing the U.S. Yeah, David is foreshadowing the U.S. 100%. I feel like Europe is just they're ahead of us, and we're just gonna end up doing the same shit as them probably. Especially if they take our guns. That's what it's written at the Das Kapital 1. I don't know what that is. Last page of on the last. That's what's written on the last page of Das Kapital 1. Do you know what Das Kapital 1 is?
Das Kapital is
Das Kapital.
Yeah. That's isn't that Karl Marx's book? I mean, I've never read it. I'll be clear. I am because I'm a social policy expert. I have to avoid that shit, and I have to read secondary source. But the problem is, it means I have to read 3 times as much to work out what's in the primary source. So yeah.
No, that's crazy. I'm gonna go to my list really quick of what we could talk about tonight. So something, guys, that me and David sometimes disagree on Twitter was the alpha beta thing between like men and women. So do you want me to give you my stance on it, David, and then you kind of rebuttal me, or do you want to just give your stance on it and then I rebuttal you? Like, what do you want to do on that?
Well, I want a sip of coffee, so you go first, man.
Okay, I'll go first. Yeah. Wait, what did my boy say? I've read that BS. It's not good at all. Yeah, Don, you've done your research. No, so the first thing for the alpha beta thing. So usually, what I usually hear you bring up is like the wolf pack. And how it's been debunked that men don't work in the wolf pack thing. And I want to say I agree with you. I completely agree with you. Men, like, it doesn't really matter. Like, different men take leadership roles, in different positions depending on what needs to be done. So, like, I agree with you that like the alpha beta pack from the wolf stance is completely stupid, and I don't know why anybody would say that. Where I always come from the alpha beta standpoint whenever I talk about it is when it's actually more from the female perspective, not from our perspective as men. The female perspective, like we've talked about this, women have a long-term main strategy and a short-term main strategy, and usually the short-term main strategy guy has the better shoulder to hip ratio. just the better jaw, the better looks. Like evolutionary psychology showed that they picked a certain type of man, even certain smells, from the t-shirt test. So whenever they did these things, we can see clear distinctions. And whenever I bring up alpha and beta, that's what I'm usually talking about, is like the alpha dynamic of how a woman sees the guy, and sometimes I also bring up something in relationships. Sometimes women will, what we call, break rules for alphas and make rules for betas, because like that guy who, like, she like is fucking us, like the alpha, she's like, oh yeah, he's like making me do this, or he's telling me to do this, yeah, I guess I'll do it because I really like him, and but like that beta dude, she's like, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do that, and like he's gonna listen because that's like all he can get. And but that's what I wanted you to understand. Whenever I talk about alpha beta, it's like I'm always talking about it from like the female lens, kind of, because that's how the women see it. And it's not even that I'm trying to say about how men are leaders, how, because like I don't like, whenever it comes to like really truly like alpha, like in the context of the world, I believe that you can be contextually alpha. Like if you were a DJ, or if you were like a promoter at a club or something, in that environment, you might be cooler than some other people there because you're a DJ, But like as soon as you leave that club, you're just a normal dude again, Like if a girl sees you out in the street, you're just normal. So it might contextually shift, but I don't think there's such thing as like a alpha, unless it maybe a guy who's just fucking bitches all the time. Like he's that guy that has like 10 bitches he's fucking a week. Maybe that guy we could call a alpha because he's fucking bitches, but not because he's a leader or anything. It's because he's just fucking mad bitches.
Okay, so yeah, I love that example about the nightclub. So I used to run some of the largest nightclubs in the UK, and this used to piss me off constantly, man. I am an ugly bastard. I have a big nose. I'm British. I've got the bad teeth, and I swear to God, if the girls saw me out on the street, they wouldn't give me the time of day. They'd look me up and down like, ugh, who is this? But I swear to God, as soon as they found out that I was the general manager of one of the biggest nightclubs in the city, they were fucking all over me. I swear I could have taken advantage of that situation. And I was single at the time. But I was that disgusted by their behavior. I was like, no, I'd rather not have sex at all. Thank you very much. Anyway, you are quite correct on certain aspects of that. So, but there is, I would say you're probably you're crossing over a couple of bits there. So, what you're talking about in terms of alpha and their success with women in terms of short-term mating strategy, all of the anthropological research shows that, in actual fact, women are choosing those so-called alphas when in actual fact they are dark triad trait individuals, meaning they're psychopathic, Machiavellian, all of that type of stuff. But the interesting thing is that women are more attracted to dark triad traits during ovulation. So it is very much a short-term mating strategy, but you're talking about K and R strategies here. So what K and R, I can never remember which way around it is. My apologies. My mental health. But one is essentially live fast, die young. The other one is be careful, live as long as you can type thing. So the women will be interested in be careful, man, for 3 weeks a month, but they'll be interested in the bad boy for 1 week a month. Do you know what I mean? With regards to the alpha beta stuff, and if there's any feminists listening to this, they're going to go, no way he's an MRA. No way did he just say that. But I swear to God, we are not the leaders of this world that the alphas think we are. So the best way to look at that is the engineering anomaly research that's come out of Princeton. And it is a 30-year longitudinal study. So there's no unpicking this. And what they've done is they've created these machines that are extremely precise, but extremely simple as well. And they require 2 inputs. So they require 2 people to operate at any one time. And what they wanted to do was find out how people work together as a team. And they had no intent of originally looking solely at gender and sex or whatever, but that's the way it ended up. And what they found is that when they put a same-sex couple on the machine, if they are working together, they manifest about the same outcome as chance. So a homosexual couple will only ever really get chance outcomes when they're working together. When they put a man and a woman on together that didn't know each other, they were getting, I think it was 2 times the manifestation of chance. But when they put a man and a woman on the machine that loved each other, they were getting 7 times the manifestation. Now, everyone presumed, well, this has got to be because of the blokes. Blokes built the world. Of course, it's the fucking blokes. Turns out it's absolute fucking nonsense. We bring very little to the table. What we bring to the table is focus. So women have, it turns out, extreme levels of energy. And they are bringing all of the manifestation, but they're like a live wire sticking out of a wall, and no insulation tape around it. And if you walk past it, you're going to get fucking hit. The bloke literally focuses his partner, and when he is able to focus his partner, when she trusts him enough to allow him to focus her, that's when they're getting the manifestation. But that's not the best bit. Women have so much energy, as they put it in the research, that if you sit a man and a woman down who love each other 2 weeks before they go on the machine, and you ask them to think about what level of manifestation they'd like to achieve, they will achieve it 2 weeks later. So women have so much energy about them, they can reach into the fucking future and demand what they're going to get.
That is so incredible, though. And if you really think about it, because I already believe in like the law of attraction and like how much you can kind of almost manifest stuff yourself just by like if you're negative all day, like negative things happen, or like if you're looking for red cars, you're gonna see lots of red cars, you know. And it's like that's the way that like I really see stuff. But it's crazy the way you just put it, where when you pair that with another person manifesting the same thing. That is real. I've never heard that. I've never heard about that before. That was so interesting. And like, I would love for you to send me that because I want to use that all the time from now on. Very
Yeah,
interesting.
she's done some great interviews. There's an hour-long one on YouTube. I'll send you a link so you can put it in the comments. But there's the argument that completely unpicks the so-called alpha red pill movement. You know, you've got to do this, you've got to be the man, you've got to tell your missus, you've got to dominate your missus. On that side, I just want to be very clear with everyone. I am a domestic violence expert. I wrote the largest study of its kind ever conducted in the UK into the lived experience of male victims. It's yet to be published, but it was 9 people more than the largest study. The largest study currently belongs to a friend of mine by the name of Deborah Powney. Intense girl, incredible girl, knows her shit. But let me guarantee everyone, every single person, whether you're in UK, US, Canada, anywhere in Europe that has the similar domestic violence laws, you try to dominate your partner, and she might like it at the start, but I guarantee you'll pay in the divorce. And I mean, not just pay in terms of, she might take my shit. If you dominate your partner after having been told by an alpha or a red pillar that that's the idea, it won't fucking matter to the judge. All that will matter is that you were domestically violent using coercive and controlling forms of abuse against your partner, and you will end up in jail. So be very careful about what everyone's being taught about this. Don't ever tell your missus what to wear, even if you're right, even if she's trying to go to a fucking funeral wearing a bikini. All you have to do is make sure the car breaks down on the fucking way there. Just don't let her go.
Yeah, I really hate whenever the guys try to control the wearing thing, man. I don't mind what my girlfriend wears. And one of the biggest reasons is because I think it makes the guy look better the better she looks. Or the more eyes
Yeah.
that are on her, the more eyes that are on you. I think that was a status thing for all of human history too. I think that guys always wanted the prettiest girl by their side, so they like it was a status thing. It's like the eyes on her equals you must be something awesome, right? You know?
Kind of. You're kind of right to a degree, but the overwhelming majority reason why we choose pretty women is because, number one, and this is why women wear makeup, symmetry is beauty to
Mhm.
human beings. And you can see this in terms of, there's argument about whether this is the case or not. There's a couple of papers that says it's been unpicked, but I prefer to believe the overwhelming majority of research rather than one paper that says it's not true and it's slightly different. But anyway, during ovulation, women's facial structure literally changes to become more symmetrical. And all they're doing there is signifying healthy genetics. So it's less about status and it's more about, yep, I'll give you a good baby. Look at my face, look at my
Yeah.
hips, look at my boobs. I'm good.
Even the long
Again,
hair and stuff too. That's why we would cut the hair off of women as one of the ultimate disgraces.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's the peacock in reverse.
Yeah.
Uh,
What whenever it comes to the beautiful mice stuff, bro, like let's talk about that. Like what's your like what do you not like about like we'll talk specifically about like Andrew Tate. You know, like when it comes to Andrew Tate, what do you think is like happening with society because of what he's teaching, you know, and you know, compare that to the beautiful mice thing that like you always talk about usually.
yeah. He's I want to be careful about Andrew Tate because he's ex-military. His father's ex-military intelligence. He was a spy, British military intelligence. So theoretically, he's family, and we defend our family to the hilt. However, I have seen the video where Andrew Tate says, "Oh yeah, get them to fall in love with you, then get them to work in the business," and that is human sex trafficking. That is the lover boy method. So he's going down whether he likes it or not. But as for him profiting off the pain of other people around the world at the moment, which is all he's doing, he is teaching exactly what the beautiful mice experiment was. Now, for those who don't know, it was Universe 25, and this is that's the name of the study, and it is the most harrowing study ever conducted in the world. Any academic will tell you this, and that's because they were looking at what happened when societies collapsed, and they managed to repeat this test over and over again, and it collapsed every single time exactly the same way. And what it showed is the more affluent, they put a load of these mice in these big cities and they gave them different levels of resources essentially. And what they found is that the more resources the rats had, or these mice had, the more things would go great for a little while, just like us. You know, think about 100 years ago, 200 years ago, whatever it was, if you wanted coffee, you'd have to talk to a lord somewhere, and they might know somebody in Africa that was shipping it over in 6 months, and you might get a few beans at that point. Whereas now we go to Asda or we go to Walmart, and you know we kick off when they haven't got our favourite brand. So we are an extremely affluent society. Now, in these sort of mice societies, the more access to resources they have, the more men, the male rat mice and the female mice wouldn't fucking copulate anymore. And it when they studied the male mice, they were becoming exactly like Tate and his followers. So they were becoming very selfish. They stopped spending any time with the girls in the community, taking care of themselves all day, licking themselves, pruning themselves, and just sitting around being lazy slobs. So when Tate is teaching people, oh, you know, concentrate on your career, don't worry about women and things like that, in actual fact, he is mirroring the downfall of society in this Universe 25. So he's teaching kids to go out there and to bring about the destruction of society, to be beautiful mice. So when you hear kids saying, oh yeah, no, I don't care about women anymore, I'm concentrating on myself, I'm going to build myself a good business, I'm going to do this, I'm going to go to the gym. I mean, they all say they're going to. I don't see an uptake in the numbers of men going to gyms to take care of themselves. They are
Right.
at home. Yeah, they're at home licking their fucking fur. It's that simple.
Yeah. So like if he was saying though that for these guys to go start families or like well not to ignore women, you know, to like try to like at least fucking, you know, be with a girl or like start a family soon. Would you think that that's at least better? Like that's not as beautiful mice if he's telling them to not, you know, be social like, you know, isolated and solipsistic and only thinking about themselves?
Yeah, do you know what? I don't like the majority of Tate's content, but that was the one video that I really liked of his. His best video was where he was sat in this podcast. I can't remember which one, but it's the table where all the girls are sat around. There's a couple of guys with mics and that. And he said, let me be clear. I went to a family reunion and my grandma was sat there and there was over 100 people in the room and they all came from her. And I can't tell you how beautiful that was. And when I
Mm-hmm.
think of my own lessons that I learned in Kosovo, yeah, that is absolutely the truth. What's going to happen to these ladies who are being taught at the moment, you know, having kids is a terribly oppressive thing, when they get to, you know, 40, 50, 60, they can't have kids anymore and they realize they've wasted their whole life. They have no family. For those of us who do have children, we know that it is the most beautiful, incredible thing in life. I'd kill for my children. I'd kill you in an instant, Sergio, if you became a threat to my child. Whereas if you became a threat to my career, you can fucking have it. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, at times he has hit the nail on the mark, especially when it comes to family. But overall, I think he's done way more damage to society, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I hear him preaching a lot more of the family stuff, especially now that I would say he's on what his hero's arc, like he's not on his villain arc anymore, and so
Yeah.
like that's one thing is like I'm gonna stand by his side until he goes down, if he goes down for the child stuff, you know. But if it comes out that that's all false accusations or they're not really true, because the way I see it is anybody can just make an accusation and then we gotta take it to court to see if it's true, you know. Like I don't believe that they're
Yeah.
guilty just because somebody says something. I want to see like more proof, you know.
Absolutely. And up until recently, up until I saw the video where he was saying, yeah, make them fall in love and then, you know, they can work for you. I felt exactly the same. And you do have to remember that the modal form of abuse for female perpetrators of domestic violence is the threat of or the utilization of false allegations. And it goes back to that utilization of gossip and innuendo as a form of reputation salvage with the intent of isolating the target from the wider social community. So your stance is the absolute correct one. Don't believe anything anyone fucking says until the evidence is there and you've seen it yourself. For me, I always stood up for him, even though I hated the majority of his content. I always stood up for him in exactly the same way. But yeah, it's hard to get around the video where he sat there going, "Oh yeah, make them fall in love with you, then make them work for you," because that is
Yeah.
the lovable method, unfortunately.
Yeah. It does. It sounds super fucking bad. Even if he was being hyperbolic just for clicks or something, it's still pretty fucking bad.
Yeah.
Um, so like me and you are really crazy about like the reason that I hate red pill so much or like MRA sometimes is the solutions to things, because I'm really crazy about being a man means having good solutions, and you have some really good solutions for stuff, and that's probably one of your biggest expertises is your solutions. So for the micro scale on a man, just on an individual level, what do you think are the best solutions for men on a micro scale right now? Like I would say that like the gym, like walking every day, getting sunlight in your eyes, just a bunch of like physical health stuff, because to me physical health is mental health for most men. So like I'm really crazy about that. What would you prescribe to a guy to make his life better, you know, on the micro, on just his individual level?
Um, wow. I mean, that's a big question, and I've never been asked that before. So thank you. I wouldn't normally want to say too much either. I'm one of these people who gets scared about saying this is the solution in case somebody does it and it goes bad, you know.
Yeah,
But I think
you can speak in general and say multiple things if you want to, you know.
Thanks, man. I think you are right. I mean, you definitely are right about mental health in terms of physical health. So, the suicide rate at the moment is affecting white cis men more than anyone else, and that's because the target of the cultural revolution is white cis men. So, when you look at the cultural revolutions of the past, most people don't know World War II came about because of a socialist cultural revolution, and the Jewish population had skyrocketing rates of suicide shortly before World War II. That was because of dehumanizing language that was being used in general. And when you do that to people, a group of people a lot, the group will start to commit suicide. You can see this in the American Psychiatric Association's Guide for Treating Men and Boys. So it's the toxic masculinity argument. They always say, you know, men don't come forward, but it's bollocks. Most men who commit suicide are under the mental health services when they commit suicide. It's just that they're not getting a therapeutic intervention, because as a woman, you are twice as likely to get a therapeutic intervention, even though you're the lowest risk. And that's because it's a female dominated field. Now, it was a Dr. John Barry, who is the head of the male psychology Male Psychology Centre for the British Psychological Society here in the UK. And he wrote a paper about a year and a half ago that very clearly showed that there was a direct causal link between the what he termed toxic terminology of toxic masculinity and the suicide rate. And that paper alone led to paragraph 3 and paragraph 7 of the American Psychiatrists Association on guidance for treating men and boys being removed. So they no longer use the phrase toxic masculinity. So if guys are out there feeling suicidal, first of all, I'd say, no matter what the problems are in your life, most of you are suicidal because of that extra part of the Cultural Revolution. Without that toxic terminology being everywhere in society, the likeliness is you would probably not be suicidal. You might still be struggling with things. So first of all, bear in mind that if those intrusive thoughts are coming up, they're not yours. They're not yours. Somebody else has put them there. Number two, the fitness thing is a great idea because they've realized that fitness is probably one of the better fixes for mental health. Specifically, they found a compound in soil that is the strongest antidepressant in the world. So if you go out into your garden, you just turn soil over, you're breathing that in, and that will help reduce your depression. When you go into a wooded area, you don't have to disturb the soil. It's already in the air. So just go to the woods and go for a walk in the woods, and you will come out the other end feeling better. And the third area is obviously eating right and making sure that you're surrounded by the right people. I guess that would probably be my advice.
Yeah, no, that was all like really good. I know something that like you would always talk about too, and I always loved whenever you would talk about this in spaces was the like guys going to like a wood shop or like going somewhere to hang out with other dudes and be social. Where did you say they would always go? Like there in England?
Yeah, my apologies. I should have thought better about that. I'm nervous on a podcast. Okay, so
I got you, bro. I know your points really well too, so I got you.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it, brother. So the single best intervention we have for men globally is men's sheds, and it started in Australia. And it turns out, and I've been trying to say this to people for about 5 or 6 years, but nobody listened until Chris Williamson said it recently.
I love that guy.
He says when you look at men, you can see when they talk, their feet are outwards like that, whereas when women talk, their feet are together, pointing at each other. And I've been saying for years, men talk shoulder to shoulder, women talk face to face. Now, it turns out what's happening in these men's sheds is that guys are going in, they're stood around a workshop and they're doing something constructive, so they feel good anyway. They're building a bird box or knocking a table together or a bench together. And we all know how blokes talk. You know, you're getting on with your work at work, and it's just like, all right, Dave, how are you? Yeah, not too bad. Fucking shite week. Oh, why? What happened? Ex-missus stopped me seeing the kids. I was supposed to see the boys on Saturday. Oh man, that sucks. I'm so sorry to hear that, man. Is there anything I can do? Nah, that's all right. Appreciate being able to say it out loud. All right, man, if you need anything. And that's how men deal with things. Whereas what we've got in therapy at the moment is purely woman-centered approaches to therapy, where we're expected to go and sit in a room and talk about our feelings. Oh, let's open up. No, thank you. No, I'd rather not. So yeah, men's sheds. I know I had my own benefit from this. There's a guy in the UK here called Martin McGreerson, who was an ex-2-power sergeant major. And we all like to say he was made beautiful by the Argentinians in the Falklands War. He was shot once in the face, twice in the arm, once in the leg, and once in the stomach. So he's ugly as sin. But he started out the veteran sheds, and I started there at the lowest point in my mental health. So I was going out at that point out of my house once every 2 weeks at 9:30 at night, so that nobody could see me. And I was walking through the woods wearing a tactical torch, red light torch, and the woods ended where the shops began. So I could nip out of the woods, get into the shop, get my food shop, and get back into the woods. And it was when the guys in the regiment realised how bad things had got in terms of the isolation that they kind of forced me to go to veteran sheds. And it was that pulled me out of my home. It made me realise that there were blokes out there that I could be around and feel safe, and I didn't have to worry. And it was then, purely then, that gave me the confidence to go back to university. So yeah, men's sheds. If nothing else works, get yourselves to men's sheds. If nothing else, you get a bird box out of it.
I wonder if there's any in America at all. I've never Googled it. Have you? Do you know? Have you researched it before?
I have researched it for Australia, New Zealand, and Europe. I've never looked at the US, but I
I
can't.
would love to see if they got anything like that here, but it is something that is so necessary, you know. What about for macro solutions? Okay, so like for me, what I'm doing on the macro scale is I actually help guys get into politics. I have a campaign manager that's one of my best friends, and we very much push people into local politics so we can start changing these things on a ground level. And we're trying to look to start a super PAC and a lot of different things to just start bringing more funding and more eyes towards destroying the woke culture, like really at the schools and stuff. One of my best friends just ran for school board right here, close to me. Whenever,
Nice.
whenever it comes to on the macro scale, I know you help a lot in the courts and stuff. What else do you like do, on that scale?
Okay, so well, I set up something known as the Veteran and Blue Light Service for a charity called Families Need Fathers, Both Parents Matter Cymru, which is a Welsh charity. But we are the only service in the UK, so we don't just help people in Wales. We help guys all over the UK. The obvious problem behind male suicide. Great research studies just been completed by Professor Ben Hine in London, University of West London. It's called Lost Dads, and it proves that divorced fathers, separated fathers are 11 times more likely to struggle with suicidal ideation than the generalized population. And you can times that by 2.4 for the veteran community. A lad that started off in my regiment, a guy called David Jukes, a couple of years ago, the last thing he was told was your PTSD has got so bad you can't see your kids anymore. So the social workers walked out the house. He walked straight out into the garden, into the shed, and hung himself. 3 years ago, I helped a father by the name of Ian Briggs, who spent 30 years in the Royal Air Force, go through the coroner's hearing for his son. So here in the UK, the Child Maintenance Service, which collects money from fathers for single mums and whatever else, they are corrupt as hell. So you can ring the Child Maintenance Service and just say, he's on 100 grand a year. And if you're convincing enough, they'll just start taking the percentage based off 100 grand a year. Now, Gavin was a good earner. He had 60 grand take home. But his two ex-partners had got together and created a load of fictitious arrears with the Child Maintenance Service. And he woke up one morning, logged onto his CMS account, and there was £50,000 worth of arrears put on there. He had £11, I believe it was, in his account at the time. He drove straight to Tesco's Metro, bought 4 cans of lager and a disposable barbecue, drove to an industrial estate and drank the 4 beers and gassed himself. We have a researcher here in the UK by the name of Brian Hudson. You can find him on Twitter, actually, and he's done some excellent research, although I would argue it's probably more correlation than causation he's been able to prove. But of the 4,799 male suicides we had last year, he has fairly categorically proved that about 1,000 of those were down to those fictitious arrears type areas. So what I do is I, on a daily basis, almost take phone calls from suicidal men. I immediately identify what the wider needs might be. So a lot of them will have complex needs like housing issues or financial issues that maybe they won't be engaged with the mental health services when they should be. Once I identify those problems, we try to signpost out to the wider support services for those. But then when it comes to the family courts, I source for them the very best and free legal support that we can. We also set up monthly meetings in almost every major city in the UK. I didn't. This was already being run by the charity. This is just something that I've tagged on to. And what happens in those meetings is probably the most important thing that we do for fathers here in the UK. So Most people can't afford the solicitors. If you're going through family court and you earn over £12,000, you've got to pay yourself. And, a small court case total will probably cost 25, 30 grand. Most people don't have that. So they go in on their own, litigant in person, and they are absolutely destroyed in court. So what we do is we have these meetings once a month where all these fathers go along, and we have a solicitor or a barrister there to give them free legal support. But it's not necessarily about the legal support that we've got them there, actually. It's a bit sneaky. So rather than sitting down with a barrister or a solicitor on your own and saying, this is my problem, can you help? And only getting 10 minutes, we get all of the guys in the room at the same time with the barrister or the solicitor, and we get everyone to take it in turns, going around the room saying, this is my problem, what do you suggest? And they get 5 minutes of advice from the barrister. But the very cool thing about that is by the end of that meeting, everyone has realised, and we have a joke about this in the men's rights space, these women seem to be working out of the same textbook. They all use the same techniques. So you have a very isolated guy who thinks his world is crashing and he's the only guy that's ever been through it. And then all of a sudden he sits in a room and one person says, this is my problem. And he goes, oh, that's a little bit like mine. Then the next person goes, oh, that's a little bit. In fact, hold on. They're all the same. Our stories are all the same. And all of a sudden, they are no longer isolated. These guys then have a group of people who are all going through exactly the same thing. The majority of them are all suicidal, and they can ring each other and say, look, this just happened. And the other one will go, wow, fucking I went through that 6 months ago. Don't do this, whatever you do. And that's how we provide support. With regards to wider, in terms of macro, I harangued the shit out of the authorities, to be quite frank. The head of the Metropolitan Police had 3 academic papers rammed on a desk about 4 months ago by the PR director for the Metropolitan Police. So if you ever want to get into the very top levels of an organization, understand that the public relations people will always put their mobile phone number on there so that the press can ring them. So you can ring that guy straight away, and he's right at the top. And if he agrees with you, he will do what that guy did, which is send us the fucking papers. I'll put it on a desk, man. So yeah, the head of the Metropolitan Police, who recently called everyone far-right misogynistic homophobes in the police, she got 3 papers like slammed on a desk, like prove misogyny even exists, you bellend. So yeah, I'm terrible for it. The government know who I am. I sat down with the Prime Minister's PP, proposed person who signs all his papers when the Prime Minister is too busy, only 2.5 months ago, and pointed out that the online harms bill seemed to suggest that the only people that should have their posts and their content filtered by AI should be white cis men, because there is this historical bias by AI filtering software. And we're not sure if that's gone through, but that slipped in under the radar for our government. And as soon as I showed him the paperwork that I had assessed with my notes all over it, his jaw dropped. He went, David, can I take that paperwork, please? I was like, yes. So I know it's landed on the Prime Minister's desk. So he who dares wins, as the SAS say, and that's what I do.
You gotta stay aggressive over there. It sounds like that was the next thing I was actually going to talk to you about, was like the American versus like European politics, or like UK politics specifically, I guess. I have this mentality where I really think that you can push back on me on this. Like, I know you'll probably disagree. I really think that European politics is dragging down my American politics over here, because y'all complain about so much stuff, and it's like, we don't have those same issues here. Stop dragging us down with you. What do you think about that, though? What do you think about the differences between the two and stuff?
Well, I think Americans are the source of all problems. I'm joking.
I would agree with you, though. I can't disagree with you on that. We are the policemen of the world, so we're going to be the source of all the issues too.
Yeah, I mean, I've served with the Americans out in Kosovo, and I found the guys quite gung ho, and I nearly shot an American who just so happened to be pointing his rather large 50 caliber fucking machine gun on the top of his Humvee as we're driving down the road straight into our cabin. And I know some of these 50 cows. I've never fired one myself, but I know some of these 50 cows haven't got a safety, and he had both of his fucking hands on the grips. And I'm thinking, if there's a bump up ahead, me and my mucker here are done. So yeah, I do worry sometimes, but no, I think in terms of the difference between the politics at the moment is Biden. Excuse me. So here in the UK, the Labour Party would be the Democrats, Biden, and our Conservative Party would be your Republicans. To give you an idea of where you're up to in terms of the ideology and why your country is so screwed at the moment, I'll take you back to the founding of the Labour Party, and it was with an organisation called the Fabian Society. So Emmeline Pankhurst was a founding member, along with a few others. And if you go to the Fabian Society's website and you look at the history section and the about section, they'll tell you that the Fabian Society is called that because it's named after a Roman conjunctor, Roman general, who pioneered the idea of waiting for the right moment to strike. So essentially, this is an ambush. But the history section also states that they wanted to bring about socialism in Europe, especially in the UK, but they couldn't because at the time World War One was kicking off and nobody wanted socialism because World War One was brought about by a cultural revolution by socialists. So in their history section, they write, what we're going to do is we're going to wait for the right moment to strike. And we're going to subvert the education system in the meantime using posters and things like that. They created the Labour Party. The Labour Party here in the UK are the radically left-leaning ones who call themselves Comrade. We are the People's Workers' Party, or whatever they would like to call themselves. Mm-hmm. If they get into power over here, because currently we have the Conservatives in, this will push the UK into a full-blown bloody civil war, because all of the policies that have come out of the Labour Party in the last 50 to 60 years are the ones that have brought about this cultural revolution. It's not just the academic world. And the way we know this is specifically, I found this out recently, Tony Blair, who was the guy who pushed us into the Second Gulf War, turns out the first thing he did when he got into power was change the Treason Act, repeal the Treason Act so that people couldn't be hanged anymore because it was the last hangable offence here in the UK. The reason that's important is because most don't know that a cultural revolution, the legal definition, both here in the UK and over there in America and right across the Western world, the legal definition is a coup d'etat. A coup d'etat is illegal, highly illegal, high treason. If they'd brought it about and high treason had still been a hangable offence, that meant he would have been hanged. So that's why he changed it as soon as he came in. And that's why you guys are struggling over there. The Roe v. Wade argument is actually a revolutionary argument that started with Mao. So whenever you can't have a cultural revolution unless you have first destroyed the family. It cannot happen. The last time they tried to bring one about before the one we're going through now was 1956 in Hungary. And the guy who tried to was George Lukács. And they failed massively. Even though they failed, thousands still died. And the intelligence services over here are predicting that thousands will die in summer in the riots. You guys are going to have crazy riots over there. We're going to have them over here. Loads of people are going to die. But George Lukács failed in Hungary. And he wrote a paper that stated the reason we failed was because the families were too strong, and the families were too strong due to religiosity. Therefore, as we push west and try again, we must first destroy religiosity. Now, when you look at how Mao got into power, he failed in his first attempt to get in as well. And he wrote a paper saying, right, what we need to do is create division along cultural lines. We're going to do that by having consciousness raising groups There's your Hegelian dialectic. Let's get everyone arguing about crazy stuff. But also, he deconstructed families. He destroyed families. So when he first got into power, the first two things he did was to recognize the family as an institution that the state could not interfere with. But the second thing he did was to decriminalize infanticide for women, on the argument that women would be best placed to know whether the family would be able to provide the resources for that child, or whether that child would become a drain on society, on the family, which is exactly the same argument that you're hearing now over abortion. And that's why Biden, that's why Biden said live on TV, strike it down, you'll have a revolution. It's like, well done, dickhead. I was only a corporal, a trooper at times in the British Army, and I know when you're in charge of a fucking rocking ship, the last thing you do is go, better not have a revolution. Do you know what I mean? You're just encouraging it. So, the difference between Europe and America comes down to the fact that you have the socialists in power. Here we have the socialists trying to get into power. Sorry, long explanation. But...
Yeah, no, it was really good though, dude. Like, no, this was actually a really good discussion, man. I'm really excited we got to do this because we got to dive deep on some really good talking points there. And there's 61 people watching right now too. We ended up there's like 55 people on Twitter. It looks like. Shout out to or 57 people from Twitter. Shout out to all my Twitter people, man. Really appreciate all the growth that we've been having over there. David, I think this means that people are going to want more content when it comes to people from our group. So I'm going to have you on. Maybe if we have people that disagree with stuff, we'll have to come on here and hash it out on the live stream sometimes or something if people like this content. But no, I really appreciate you for coming, man. And I really hope we got to learn something more about each other. Like I learned a lot about you and like your history. And my whole thing is I like learning more about people or learning more about things because through understanding, you learn to love something more or respect it more through understanding it. So I hope that maybe you learned something about me too, and like through that understanding we can grow in some love and some respect because we know the brothers need to stay together now more than ever. So
hell yeah. And my apologies for calling you an alpha so many times, man. You're clearly not. So you have my sincerest apologies.
Oh, and I do want to say also, I like to brag that I'm the biggest beta ever because I think that guys in relationships, I'm kind of naturally a beta, bro. I like to, eat popcorn and watch movies with my girl every once in a while. I guess I'm a beta. I guess I'll take it, man.
You're a big romantic, aren't you?
Yeah, dude, I am for sure. I for sure am, and I'll stand on that and be very proud of it too because I don't think there's anything wrong with it. There's nothing wrong.
Absolutely, as you should be. Yeah, that's what's missing. It's actually, if people are looking for anyone who can point to that side of things, I'd suggest Peter Wright on Twitter. Does some excellent content on romantic chivalry, that type of thing. So,
I didn't know you loved Peter also, man. I'm obsessed with him.
Who doesn't? The guy's outstanding.
I love his work because like I really don't like that guys. I mean, you know this from working with suicide victims. Like I don't like that guys fall so hard in love that they get one-itis, as some people in the red pill space would talk about, where you think this is the one girl or something. Like you have such a deep love that they want to, self-delete over it. And it's like I really love Peter's work because when you understand love and the way that he talks about it, and just the romantic side of it, and how when you realize it's really just lust and it's really just to kind of sell books and to sell for emotional capitalistic reasons to just be able to make money off of Valentine's Day and shit. It's like fuck all that shit. Like that's not what love is. Love is something that's way more not unconditional but way more it goes through way more troubles and like problems. Like I feel like lust kind of fails after a few years because the girl thinks that like it's supposed to be special, but it was just lust. It wasn't love.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. Love at first sight does not exist. Love is something that is earned between two people, and it takes a long time, I think. So yeah, couldn't agree more.
That's a good way. But and I loved Peter too because he owned Ligma in the greatest way anybody's ever owned him. Did you see that post when he did that?
No, I
Oh,
don't know. You'll have
dude.
to send me a link.
He basically summed up the reason why Ligma acts the way he does. Like he always puts the pussy on the pedestal and acts like women have control over the whole world is because like he basically like has a fetish for like women always being in power and being in control. And Peter like got into an argument with him one day on Twitter. And once he like posted that and made it clear that he just has this fetish for that shit, I was like, okay, this fully explains Sigma now. Like this is why he acts like this. He just can't let go women being in, because like even my relationship, like he always makes it clear that like women are always in power. It's like, no, like some relationships, like the girl kind of is working for the guy a lot, and like she's putting a lot of value up and she does a lot. It's like if you dated a girl that didn't put up a lot of value, that's like your fault, I think. Like maybe you should have chose a better girl instead of been with the one that you were with.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more.
Dude, no, this was such a good. I can't believe there's 68 people watching, man. Really big shout out to all these Twitter people, guys. I'll be back on Friday, especially since I'm gonna have Man of Steel on. He's a big pickup artist, so please check that out. David, where can they find you on Twitter though? Especially since there's a lot of Twitter people watching, so they can go add you.
Well, you can find me on any platform if you use the hashtag Stoic Sense. I do that specifically because of the amount of times I've been cancelled by feminists. So if my account gets cancelled, just type in hashtag Stoic Sense and you will find me on the latest account. So cheers,
What's
guys.
your at also though? Is it at Stoic Sense as well?
Yes, it might be at Stoic Sense 2. I think it is. I think that's the second Stoic Sense I've had on Twitter.
Okay. Good. No, good, because I want them to be able to go add you, man. Thank you so much, dude. Here, stick around. I'm gonna end the stream, but we can talk for a second after it's over. But yeah, see
Okay,
you. See you later, guys. Peace out. YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble, all you fuckers on all Facebook. Bye, guys. I'll see y'all in a couple days.
Thanks, everyone.